You're listening to Thursday Night AMP on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Thursday Night AngryMarks.com Pro Wrestling and Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. My name is Stevie J, and my co-host, as always, is Jordan Garber.
How are you doing tonight, Stevie? And how are you doing today, Paul?
Yes, he's already introducing our guest, stealing my thunder. Paul O'Brien, the author of Blood Red Turns Dollar Green, the series that's available on Amazon and everywhere else, is with us on the line. Good evening, Paul.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for having me aboard.
It's our pleasure, and I gotta ask you the question right off the bat, since obviously you're a wrestling fan or you never would have gotten into wrestling novels in the first place. So when you were growing up, was it World Wrestling Federation or World of Sport? What drew you in?
Oh, let's see. So World of Sport came first, for sure. But that was kind of like a Saturday afternoon kind of something that, you know, that you'd watch with your grandmother type of thing. And then it was World Wrestling Federation was kind of when I got into World Wrestling Federation, there wasn't any other wrestling fans left because, you know, World of Sport was sold as an actual sport. But WWF was, you know, it was fake, and what are you doing looking at that? And I used to plead my case to my family, like I said, but it's the same as World of Sport. No, don't you dare say that. World of Sport is real, how dare you? So I used to have to plod along to my own bedroom and watch WWF on my own, you know. But yeah, definitely World of Sport came first.
I don't know if you had this experience that I did, but when I was watching World Wrestling Federation growing up, people felt like they needed to point out to me all the time, hey, you know that stuff is fake, right?
Yeah, like, exactly.
I don't know why they thought kids wouldn't understand that. It's like, I watch Star Wars, I know that they're not really in outer space. They don't need to explain to me that the wrestlers aren't really hurting each other.
It's funny, you know.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
And that's the thing, is that when you watch wrestling and then you watch another show or something, you obviously realize that they're playing an act in the ring, but the point is that it's entertaining, and that's what it's supposed to be, right? So as long as you understand that and still enjoy it for entertainment value, then you can call yourself a good wrestling fan for sure.
I think so, you see, but I think the difference is here that wrestling has itself to blame actually, because George Lucas never came back kind of dampening his sweating brow and said, we've just come back from Tatooine, you know, and tried to sell it to us like he just, you know, that spaceship out there actually works. Where wrestling, you know, because I'm actually, you know, I'm researching from the 1900s upwards now for another kind of, certainly one novel anyway. And, you know, it's fascinating to me the kind of way it came from the carnivals and, you know, how much onus there was on keeping the con, you know, that this is real. Because if it wasn't real, the great fear was that it would just evaporate, because why else look at it? So wrestling has always been kind of schizophrenic in itself from its starting, you know, its beginnings as an actual sport, moving in then to more of a work, and then moving up to the 90s where Vince came on camera and said that this is pure entertainment. You know, I think that's why people have often pointed out to us as kids that you look at, you notice this is fake, right? You know, and the analogy then with the kind of Star Wars thing would be fairer, again, if George Lucas went on the 9 o'clock news when the first Star Wars came out and said, you know, I've just come back from space and here's the documentary I made.
Yeah, nobody would caught into that for a second, it wouldn't work. But somehow we're supposed to accept when Triple H and Stephanie McMahon come out and say, you know what, we're the power in this business and we're the power on this show. I don't need them mixing up what they really do behind the scenes with what they do on the camera. It's a little too much.
Yeah. And again, that's always been, dipped in, wrestling has always dipped itself into kind of, you'd hear some people saying it was the first reality show. And kind of in many ways that's true, and that, the way reality is kind of half dipped in what's happening, and then there's a lot of script going on as well. Kind of wrestling was that before, there ever was any kind of reality TV, so it does blur the lines quite effectively, I have to say.
It does, but I will take it on a side tangent here because I don't know if there's an affiliate of El Rey Network anywhere in Europe that carries the show, but I've become deeply invested in Lucha Underground because it's a self-contained show that pretends it's real within its own reality. They don't have, like, Antonio Pena from AAA coming out and saying, I own this job and everybody here works for me. They have a fake owner that they've installed who's a professional actor, and he acts like it's real and they act like it's real, and I get really invested in it because it's completely self-contained and it's not a worked shoot.
That's it. I mean, again, this is why I always think that wrestling has itself to blame. You see, on one hand, you have this awful term called marks, that some kind of wrestlers still use for wrestling fans, we take, when the WWE network didn't kind of blossom right at the start and it's still struggling, the feedback coming back was, that wrestling fans don't get it. Go out and re-explain it to them. There was no ever... the emphasis was never on the WWE that, hang on, maybe you guys are doing something wrong here. No, we fully get what this is. We still don't want it. I have to say, I have it because I'm a huge wrestling nerd. But, it is that again. It's almost like, don't come out and kind of half dip your toe into reality water and then not dip it into reality water and then, use the defense that, hey, this is only wrestling. Don't take it so seriously. Like we say, even after WrestleMania, where Daniel Bryan came out after 2 grueling matches, and he wanted to sell, and Vince told him not to sell because it's only wrestling fans. They don't care about little details like that.
And those are the exact things we care about.
Exactly. That drives me nuts.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here, because I'm sure Jordan and I are 100% in agreement with you, and it just is mind-boggling, especially given that they know the word wrestling is in their name. It's like, we didn't come to World Wrestling Entertainment for a reality show. We came to World Wrestling Entertainment for the wrestling word.
I know. And this is, again, the great schizophrenia. I must, sometimes I write articles for Wrestling Observer. I must actually write one on the schizophrenia of wrestling, It's like, wrestling is ashamed of itself. And then it can't help but go to the fancy party and kind of, get drunk and start a fight and then wonder why they're not invited to all the parties anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. Hey, as a fellow Wrestling Observer writer myself, I have to say Ultimate Fighter would be the perfect example of this, because it's a reality show, but it's not real, because we know they film hundreds of hours of footage and cut it down to the hour or so that's actually interesting, and then put commercials in there. So it's really only like 44 minutes of footage, but for those 44 minutes, they suck you in, because that even though it's cut and it's edited and it's trimmed, those 44 minutes are real things.
Absolutely. And one of the big reasons for me as well is that, the Ultimate Fighter is the most base of storytelling, which, most seasons works a treat. We have had, a couple of seasons that misfired or whatever. But, as a writer, when you ever want to compel any type of audience to keep viewing, you have to find out where the conflict is. And I always think that, professional wrestling thinks that it's kind of, behind the 8-ball in terms of storytelling, because it only has, it can't do big setups, it can't do helicopter chases and so on and so on. I always think that professional wrestling has a huge advantage over other, forms of entertainment, because it is set up around conflict. And, if you look at any movie or any TV series, it takes 20 minutes to get to the conflict with, when's the bad guy going to show up? Now we have to find out what he wants. Then he has to go and do the thing. Now the good guy has to stop him. Where wrestling can kind of get straight to the meat and potatoes of that, because there's one reason why there's a ring in the middle of 10,000 people. It's because we're going to resolve some sort of conflict. And for me, wrestling doesn't do that enough. I mean, it's almost ludicrous that it avoids, it'll put on Angry Cat or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Grumpy Cat.
Grumpy Cat. Instead of, why does wrestler A dislike wrestler B? What happens if wrestler A loses? What's the stakes? What happens if wrestler B loses? And then part C then is, when are they going to meet to resolve this conflict? It's kind of almost like a too simple a formula that they keep messing around with it all the time.
Well,
like if I was to ask the two of you guys, as huge wrestling fans as well, what's the last great conflict in wrestling that you guys got really sucked into?
I think the greatest one that I got absolutely sucked into was, unfortunately, it does cross that work shoot line, but Vince McMahon and Steve Austin. It was the common man versus the boss, and you wanted to see him beat up the boss.
Yeah. And that was the conflict was just born out of that because we could all empathize.
And Jordan,
for me, when I looked at the conflict of the whole, when you talked about getting sucked in, and as me as a fan actually getting sucked into the conflict, I looked at the part where it was the whole CM Punk kind of rebellious gimmick thing when he had that. He returned. He had that rebellious thing, and I remember because I was kind of newer to the business at the time, kind of like marking out all the time because it's like, oh, is this guy serious? Is this guy not serious? And that's something that really got me into it because CM Punk's outspoken. He'll speak his mind, and to that's really got me to become a bigger fan because of that conflict. That's a great part about wrestling. When there's conflict, you're gonna get more viewers, you're going to get more watchers because you have a heel, you have a face, you have a match, you have a story to tell. So part of that's what's great about it pretty much, is that there's always going to be a conflict and there's going to be at least one entertaining thing about every match.
Absolutely. I mean, I see that, Randy Orton is getting pushed again, and that's fine. We understand that they're down a few good guys. But what's his conflict? I mean, what's his goal? What is he trying to achieve? Like, why does he flip so much from good guy to bad guy? I mean, in the how would WWE explain that within the parameters of the boundaries in the world that they set up? Even like what's motivating Randy Orton right now?
Right now, I think it's that the Authority was ignoring him and overlooking him, and he thought he was more important in the grand scheme of things, and they view Seth Rollins as the golden boy, and he finally took offense to it and said, he's not the golden boy, I am, and if I have to prove it to you, I will. And that's me interpreting it myself.
But doesn't that sound like, nothing like babyface should be?
No, it's completely egotistical. It's not a babyface move at all.
That's it. I mean, we're supposed to buy this guy's T-shirts and cheer him at the next pay-per-view because he wasn't pretty enough that the bad guys didn't notice him. And they found someone prettier, and now we're supposed to say, yay, let's get behind him.
Yeah, it's ludicrous if you actually think it through, but that's the problem with a lot of WWE storylines these days. And that's not the problem with Blood Red Turnstile or Green, because it's all built around cohesive storylines. You can follow and understand the motivations of everybody.
That's it, and I work really hard on these novels. We're talking years of my life have gone into these novels. These aren't like I remember before anybody read these, I was trying to get Mick Foley to read them, and I would send him a tweet here and there, and he was actually replying to me, being the good guy that he is, and I remember he was nicely saying kind of no to me. And I remember just saying that at the kind of last tweet I said to him, I said, I promise you if you read these aren't some awful fan fiction. And I eventually kind of cracked and said, okay, send me the book. So I sent it to him, and a couple of weeks later he wrote me this very kind and, for me, humbling email saying, I had no idea. I love these. I will endorse these any way I can. I will help you get the word out because I know how hard it is sometimes to get wrestling fans to try something different. And even when I said to wrestling fans, these are crime wrestling novels, kind of like, again, a Mick Foley quote is like The Godfather with suplexes. I can't think of a better description than that. Wrestling fans still kind of say, well, I'm not that sure. Now, obviously, somewhere along the line, a whole heap of wrestling fans and crime fans bought into this, because the first couple of novels, there's 3 out now. That the third one has just come out last week. But the first 2 novels, like, I was lucky enough that they sold over 55,000 copies, and raised a lot of eyebrows in the publishing world in general, because I chose to self-publish them.
It struck a chord that many people were interested in something that wasn't coming out from like Random House or any big publisher. It was just completely out there on its own, and these other businesses had to be looking at it like, wow, how did this thing go viral completely under our noses, and why didn't we have Paul O'Brien signed to a deal?
You see, and that was the thing, before these kicked off at all. Again, I was lucky enough that an agent and a publishing house looked at these novels, thought they were wonderful, asked me to sign with them, but then said, we only have 1 note. And I thought, well, 1 note is not bad. And they said, can you take the wrestling out of it?
Oh, that was a deal breaker.
So I said, to be honest with you, I said, if I take the wrestling out of it, I'm going to become crime writer number 10 million. If I leave the wrestling out of it, I'm going to be the wrestling crime guy over here to the left, all on my own. And I knew that it was a risk, but I walked away from both contracts. I knew where the wrestling fans were, and thanks to people like your good selves letting me on their podcast, I have no advertising budget, I have no agent, I have no lawyers, I have none of that stuff. And, these novels have been number 1 in 7 and 8 countries, going head to head with all the wrestling novels that come out every year and every Christmas. My books have managed to get to number 1 instead, or fight their own battles, with some of the big heavy hitters out there.
Now, when you talk about doing research for the books, tell us a little bit about that process, because like you said, it's a crime novel, it's also wrestling. It ties them together. So where does the research start?
Yeah, I mean, my idea for this was to create a fully realistic wrestling world. So on certain dates, that were pertinent in the real wrestling world calendar, that they would be pertinent in my world as well. The buildings are Madison Square Garden and the Cow Palace, and, the steakhouses are the Ribera Steakhouse, and so on and so on. So it's a real world, authentic. The colors on the bricks are the colors of the bricks in those buildings at that time. The weather on the days, so I could say the 26th of October, if it was raining that day in Michigan, and the scene is in Michigan, then it's raining. I go through phenomenal detail. It took me 3 days to figure out the color of the carpet in JFK in American Airlines in 1969. And I found it. It's red, by the way, if you want to know.
Blood red, probably.
Exactly. So, the research, what I did is I compiled a phenomenal amount of research, and then I had to decide what to use and what not to use, because, I want your listeners to know that these novels don't sit down for a second. I mean, I'm not the type of writer who's going to spend 4 pages explaining the shape of somebody's nose to you. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to try and entertain you quick. There's each one of these novels has, many, many novels worth of story and conflict, characters, and they jump out at you. They set up the next 2 books. So, if your listeners were thinking about diving in here, these are very, very fast-paced books.
Indeed, they are. They are definitely fast-paced. And since I've been dominating a lot of the conversation so far, I know Jordan's got some questions about the book. So, Jordan, why don't you take the floor? The office is yours.
Awesome stuff. I'm looking forward to asking you a few questions, Paul. First off, that's one thing about wrestling, and you're kind of in a publishing role in the business as well as obviously me and Stevie J are in a media role of the business. But just what got through your mind do you remember that day when you just first started writing that first page, and how did you find out you wanted to become a wrestling writer?
Yeah, you see, I'm a playwright in Ireland here for maybe 20 years, and I've been very fortunate in that I've hit most of the professional stages in Ireland and a couple outside as well. I had a really good career and have a really good career doing that. But also as well, like I said to you guys, I'm a long time, like a 30-year wrestling fan as well, and I've always wanted to marry both. I've never understood how nobody has done this before. If you break down the territory system, it's especially in the US, it was, that the country was carved up, that there was bosses in each territory, that each boss didn't infiltrate the other boss's territory. There was underbosses. It was a seedy underground world, a cash business. Keep away from the federal government. Keep away from the local law enforcement. It was really tough to get into, and not many people left it. And so, what does that sound like when you break it down? That sounds like, the kind of the old mafioso setup. And what I thought was, that these guys, like the wrestling guys, the Carney guys that started off, they had this thing down before the Sicilians even arrived, about carving up territories and moving cash in and kind of, relieving people from their money. And what was fascinating to me is that nobody had done it before. So, my first day of writing this, the advice I got from a few, very successful writer friends of mine was to not do it. Because the word wrestling is very kind of toxic. And I said, I'm not going to write this, and then he kicked him in the stomach and then he hit him with the Stone Cold Stunner and they all went home. I mean, these are kind of Boardwalk Empire. These are Sopranos. These are those types of novels where, the wrestling is the backdrop, but it's all about these wrestling bosses who all want control of the country, which means the heavyweight title, because that brings the power and the money, and they're willing to do anything to each other to get it. For sure. And you totally agree with what you're saying, and everything you're saying makes complete sense for sure. And I kind of go a little bit ahead here, but I checked out your website, is paulobrien.info, and yep.
I follow you on Twitter. And I couldn't help but notice all these big names are actually endorsing your product. Like they are reading this book and they're reviewing it. Like, do you kind of look back and you see the William Regals, the Paul Heymans, the Mick Foleys? All of them are reading this and supporting it. What do you think? When you first started, do you think you would go that far to actually having big names know who you are?
I really didn't, and that's an honest account. I had no idea. I was willing to put 2 years of my life into the first novel. I had no idea how it was going to land because nobody has ever carved up this road before. No one has been down this path. I had no idea, but I knew that I wanted to try everything I could to get Mick Foley. Number one, Mick Foley is genuinely my favorite wrestler. Has been, since way before the Attitude Era. Number two, he is a phenomenal writer in his own right. So after kind of a year of dancing with Mick and him not being sure, and because I think he thought that this was just going to be another fantasy fiction novel. But when he read it and saying, "Whoa, this thing stands up." Once Mick endorsed it, then it got a little bit easier. And then William Regal endorsed it. It got a little bit easier. Then, Paul Heyman, and then Jim Ross, and then Bret Hart, and then Fergal Devitt, and just today, I've just been emailing back and forth with Chris Jericho, and Chris Jericho would love to read the novels now. And for me, because people kind of at this stage they kind of heard my name before, or they've heard the name of the books. When somebody introduces me to somebody else, they're like, yeah, I know those books, and I say, well, do you mind if I send you a copy? I'd love to send you a copy and get your opinion on it. Nobody has said no, which is, I mean, you guys again follow wrestling closely like I do. I cannot remember a time when, names at the level of those, or any names to be honest about it, have come out for a product that is not related to their company, that is not owned by them, and of course certainly they didn't get any payment for it. They've just come out en masse, spontaneously, and said all these wonderful things about these novels because they dearly love these books. And that, for me, is probably the most humbling thing that has happened out of all of this.
Now, that does raise... Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, and I know what you mean. Like, someone that's saying that they love your work is one of the greatest rewards you could ever feel, because you feel good that people are actually noticing it and actually do appreciate it. And exactly. And then, like you said about after talking to Mick Foley, and that's the thing in wrestling, is that after you talk to that one big name, you might be in line for some good connections, and that worked that way for myself as well. So I can totally relate to that. It was once you get your name out there, it's easier to get to talk to the bigger names for sure, and get good feedback.
And then the other thing, Jordan, as well, is, it's very humbling for me to kind of have, my childhood idols and heroes saying that they love the work that I do. But also as well, I suppose what was a little bit more important to me is that they have vouched for his accuracy. I mean, for somebody like William Regal, who doesn't come out and say much about anything really, he's a private man. He likes to stick to his own guns. I think he's superb on the WWE DVDs. But apart from that, I haven't heard his opinion on any of the major events. He doesn't come out and give interviews or court publicity. His exact phrase was that he was in awe of the research in these novels. Like, that just blew my mind to have somebody like William Regal say that. And for me, it was like, if you're going to write a book about World War II and you have a lot of veterans around who said that we'll read it, that's when you're at your most nervous, because you don't want one of those veterans who were actually there at that time, someone like Jim Ross or Mick Foley, who came at the end of the territories, to say that, no, these novels don't capture that era at all, or, your research is way off there, that never happened, or this would never happen in real life. None of those guys. I mean, Jim Ross's quote is that they're a power slam of literary mastery. I mean, how am I ever going to beat that?
Yeah, well, Jim Ross knows how to turn a phrase anyway.
He
but
certainly does.
I think unintentionally Jordan asked the question I was going to ask, and you kind of already answered it, but I'll take it a little further, because you mentioned that everybody talks about the authenticity of it, how it feels real. But you talked a little earlier about doing the research on the places, the events, the weather that day, and you get those details right. But when it comes to the grappling, and like you said, they're crime novels too, so it's not all about the grappling. But when it comes to that, do you have a wrestler that whispers in your ear, that's not the way we apply a headlock? Do you ever get those kind of notes from wrestlers?
Actually, what was great was that Bret Hart emailed me a couple of weeks ago. And while he kind of didn't say about, headlocks or whatever, he said that, again, love the novels. He's read the first one. He's actually on to the second one now, which is a bit nerve-wracking. But he gave me a few pointers like that. He wished that I would have talked about how hard these guys were outside the ring. What I just sent an email back to Brett is, absolutely thank you for your opinion. And I said, but just bear with the series, because that definitely kind of, it comes out. And anything, because Mick Foley was the first endorser, I felt that I can't let him down when I was writing the second book, because he endorsed the first book. He was the first one there. And it would have been horrible, like, for me, for him, for everybody, if the first book had been bang on and then the second one had been rushed, and he was kind of like, oh my God, why did I endorse these novels now? So it was fantastic for me that Mick came back in the second time, and he even liked the second book more than the first book. And so, yeah, I mean, the research and the little voice, every time a reader emails me, or every time I get a DM, and, my Twitter's quite a busy feed, and the emails certainly are from the website, and I definitely feel that. I feel that I want, and that's why I felt that these novels got better, thankfully, 1, 2, and 3.
Now, you're a writer by trade. You mentioned being a playwright as well in Ireland and being very successful at that. So, you know the theater quite well. You know drama. You know that actors take risks when they go out there on the stage, but have you ever been in the process of writing and thought to yourself, I should try taking this bump to see how it feels, to know if I'm really describing it right?
I have not. The reason being is because I'm way too smart for that. I mean, these guys, I would never ever attempt, and not because of those ads either, but, I fully understand that in this world, I am a writer and they are wrestlers. There's a reason for that. I would, sometimes in my kind of vanity and ego, I'd think to myself, I wouldn't mind going to WWE and kind of doing a writing gig for a year, something like that, but I've never ever thought I'd like to headline WrestleMania, because I know exactly what that entails, and no, thank you very much.
It always amazed me how WWE can't resist the urge to bring their writers out and have them get involved in the stories. Like when they would send Chris DeJoseph out there and have him take bumps for people and wiggle around in his oily clothes. It's like, why would you have the writers do? Let the writers write and the wrestlers wrestle.
Well, that's it, and it's kind of, I suppose, it's like the product of the kind of backstage environment that, down through the years, it has seemed like that Vince has never been shy about letting his audience suffer for 10 or 20 minutes while he has a little cackle.
Right.
And, you know, in many ways you have to admire that. I'm sure a guy who doesn't take any holidays and doesn't sleep much has to get his kick somewhere. Unfortunately, we have to see a lot of them, like the Dr. Heine skit and those types of things.
Yeah, and Katie Vick, I'm sure he thought that was hilarious, but the only reason that was hilarious is later on when wrestling writers started to tear it to pieces. That's when it became funny, was when all the internet wrestling websites were like, I can't believe they thought this was a good idea.
Exactly.
So, I guess that raises a segue question, because you mentioned being a longtime fan of wrestling, just like we are, and there are times when our love for wrestling gets tested, and obviously you're writing the novels now, so that love still comes through in the books, but were there ever times in the last, say 10, 15 years where you thought, why do I still follow this?
Yeah, there's a couple of kind of vivid ones for me. The Mantor era.
Oh yeah.
Just before, it was, I said just before, it was a year or two before the big boom again, but that low, oh my God, that was hard. The Eddie Guerrero era, after Eddie Guerrero passed, that was really hard for me to look at for a completely different reason, and it was the only time I switched off wrestling for any period of time. I just thought they fully exploited, such a great wrestler's death.
Yeah, Randy Orton's whole "he's down there" comment really was a low that I found hard to be comfortable with.
Yeah, exactly, and there was no amount of, explanation, because obviously, it came out that way. There was a big backlash against it, and then, of course, the spin came out from WWE saying this is what Eddie would have wanted, and he was a performer, and he would have understood that this is for business, and that all might be true, and Eddie's wife might have been there kind of signing off on it, and Eddie's cousin, nephew would have been there, Ray would have been there, and so who am I to say, but, I just found that, me personally, I don't want to watch this, no matter who signs off on it. So I just kind of clicked off for, a couple of months.
And it doesn't seem they learned any lessons from that, because we saw the same thing when Paul Bearer passed away, that, they said, well, his sons have signed off on it, so the family is okay. And then a few months later, we started hearing comments from his sons like, well, we signed off on it, but that's not what we wanted. It's like, okay.
Exactly.
They took it to a level of exploitation and tasteless debauchery that nobody in that family actually wanted.
And this is the thing, and those types of stuff never ever make compelling television. I wouldn't mind if they think, okay, listen, we're going to weather this backlash here because this is going to be amazing television, or this is going to pop in a brilliant buy rate. The whole Paul Bearer thing for me pulled down the CM Punk Undertaker confrontation. It just made it sag. The Rey Mysterio would have got over way on his own, way ahead of the whole Eddie Guerrero thing, which I think just ended up in, a weight on his back that he had to kind of carry around. So, yeah, if, they didn't even have the excuse that this is amazing television.
No, and you're right. I think the story for Ray would have simply been enough if it had just been, here's this amazing wrestler who does these amazing moves, but he's so small and he's in the land of giants. That would have been enough of a story for me. Like, can he overcome the odds just based on the size difference? Exactly.
But you see, Vince never liked the whole, he never liked the good guy overcoming the odds thing. If you look back through his champions, he's definitely a babyface company. He more or less always has a good guy as champion, but they never really overcome the odds. Like, there was Super Hulk Hogan, then, there was Super Cena, even Steve Austin in the middle pretty much stunned everybody in the company about 27 times. Even though I usually enjoyed that one, but it was never about, the good guy that was in peril for any length of time or whatever. And for any good reason. Even if you look at the latest thing with Cena and Brock Lesnar, when Cena took all those suplexes, I was thinking, this is phenomenal storytelling. Now let's change the Cena character forever. And I don't even mean turn him heel. Just, have him kind of be broken for once and have him try and struggle back to the top and have him suffer with his confidence and have all these compelling reasons why he's not the same Cena as he was, and watch him rise back up to the top and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no. Next pay-per-view, a couple of days later, all those suplexes were for nothing.
Yeah, that's I think what people hold against Cena. It's not that we don't respect him as a hard worker. It's not that we don't recognize his charitable work. It's that the character never deviates from the most simplistic formula to the point that you can't believe in him as a real person. He's a cartoon character. He's Superman. Nothing ever hurts him. He's invulnerable. He just bounces back no matter what. And if it was a cartoon, we'd enjoy that, but it's not.
And that's it. I mean, and you know, I hear people say Super Cena, Super this, and Superman. And you know what I always say there is that even Superman, the writers of that comic book series were even smart enough to put in Kryptonite,
Right?
Because everybody needs the Achilles heel, or why root for them? You know, if you can't figure out a way to put your good guy in peril, whether it's a TV show or a movie or whatever, then you know, after 10 minutes, it's just like, well, where's the danger? And if there's no danger, then why am I compelled to watch it?
And Lex Luthor for the same reason. Obviously, he can't be stronger than Superman, but he can be more clever than Superman. And that's what made him a compelling villain, was he would come up with these ingenious plans just with the power of his mind.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so every Superman needs some kryptonite, but Cena never seems to find that. Even Brock Lesnar should have been his kryptonite, and he was just back the next day brushing it off his shoulders saying, hey, I'll get a rematch with Brock and I'll beat him.
Exactly. And it meant none, so why watch it?
Yeah, well, we watch it because we're lifelong at this point. They've kind of got us by the balls. We can't let go of it because we still love it.
We're lifers.
Yeah, we are. Isn't that right, Jordan? We're lifers.
Yeah, exactly. And let me ask you another question here, is that everyone's listening, obviously, around, not like everyone in the world, obviously, but we have a good, AngryMarks.com obviously has a huge following. And there's people listening from around the world. So obviously, tell us where, like, for example, myself, is this book available in stores? I know it's on Amazon, but you just get it on Amazon. Pretty much in general, how can people get a hold of your book?
Yeah, I think the safest way, because it's kind of hit and miss, the safest way where everybody can get it is your big online stores. So your Barnes & Noble, your iBook store, your Amazon, Smashwords, you know, those types of big booksellers. You're always going to get them there, and you can get them in ebook version or you can get them in paperback. And you know what I always say to wrestling fans is that the first book, Blood Red Turns Daughter Green, Volume 1, is 99 cents. And I want to put it down at 99 cents is because I want to make the get as wide as possible to get people to walk through it. I mean, you know, try the first novel. It's 99 cents. If you don't like it, very little money down, very little money lost. But, you know, the grand percentage of people who buy these novels, you know, they become huge fans and they move on to 2 and 3. So I hope that, you know, people will dive in and try something like that.
Awesome stuff, yeah. And yeah, for sure, obviously, I know for a fact that I'll check out your book, and I know everyone listening here on AngryMarks.com will check out your book as well, and it looks like it's really good, and obviously you have the veterans and the big names in the wrestling business to prove it for sure. So you should be proud of everything you've accomplished.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. And I'll take it back to pro wrestling in Europe because, I mean, you're in Ireland and, you know, it's a different scene there than we're used to in North America, Canada, the United States, Mexico. So what would you say it's like there right now as somebody that's, you know, still watching WWE and the other products that are available globally, but there's still things going on locally?
For sure. I mean, you know, Ireland at the moment, because it always had, you know, since the kind of Attitude Era, there was always a nice little kind of underground scene in Ireland. But since Sheamus made it, and now we have Prince Devitt, it's Finn Balor and Becky Lynch coming through. You know, that people are able to see, like, I think that Finn Balor is going to be, you know, kind of the future of WWE. I really do. I don't know if you guys have spotted him down on NXT yet, but he's coming.
Yeah. I recapped the episode where he debuted, in fact, and I was super excited because I knew his reputation as Fergal Devitt in New Japan. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're fine, yeah.
Yeah, so when I saw him debut and come out to make the save for Hideo Itami, better known as Kenta to a lot of people, when I saw him come out there with Kenta, it's like, oh my God, I'm watching New Japan on the WWE Network.
I know, it's crazy. And for me, like, NXT is my favorite wrestling show, which it is to many kind of wrestling nerds. But I mean, this guy, you know, and it looks to me as well like obviously Triple H has a huge hand in NXT. that they're making Finn Balor look like a star, and his entrance is a little bit overproduced, I think, with the whole top rope jump in, flip around, do the hand thing. I think they'll simplify that though, because there's one thing about Fergal Devitt is that he's a quiet enough person out of the ring. He's a humble person. Years in the dojo will probably do that to you, but he is smart. I mean, this guy knows how to pull an audience's eye towards him. Whether that's with the body paint, whether that's with the the unique movements, whether that's with the kind of unique move set. This is a guy who knows how to hold an audience, and I was lucky enough to get to know him. I actually personally thank him in Blood Red Turns Dollar Green Volume 3, because a lot of the scenes are set in Japan in Volume 3, and to have someone like Fergal Devitt at the end of a phone or an email to ask, how was this? I mean, if I was to go there now, what's this like? Describe the smell to me. What's the Roberta bathroom like, for instance? He sent me it was a really fantastic email, a long email on the kind of sights and the smells of the Ribera's steakhouse bathroom, which was, it all ended up in the book, so, so the scene here in Ireland is great, and in the UK it's bustling, and I think there's going to be a lot more wrestlers from here that will make it over to your neck of the woods and hopefully earn good livings out of it.
Yeah, I think the UK in general is exporting a lot of great talent right now, because we're seeing Pac, who is now going as Adrian Neville in NXT.
That's right.
He's been phenomenal as the NXT champion. And I feel when people ask me what their favorite era of wrestling is, everybody always talks about the 1980s. But for me, I love the 2000s, which not a lot of people say, but it's because I remember seeing Pac before he was Adrian Neville, and now I see him on NXT, and I'm like, I'm seeing this guy's career from the start to the main, to get to the big stage.
It's amazing, he's a guy, I'm kind of lucky enough in that I get to go from here to Florida every year. I kind of go on vacation over there, and the last few years I've gone over specifically to hit, NXT events, and Adrian Neville is so unassuming. Now, he's wide. I mean, he's thick, muscly guy. But I walked by him once at a WWE live event in Florida, because he's so unassuming. He walks with his head down. He wears glasses during the day. His hair is tied back. He's certainly, again, a muscular, fit-looking man, but he doesn't look like a professional wrestler. And then, half an hour later or whatever, 45 minutes later, I got to see this guy in the ring. And his transformation was just phenomenal, and the way he held himself. His head was up, his chin was back, confidence was there. Obviously he flew around the ring. He's a phenomenal wrestler anyway, but I'm just thought about his body language, to go from the kind of unassuming, almost Clark Kentish guy outside into the, the kind of, the man that gravity forgot inside. It's just a phenomenal turnaround for somebody.
I love wrestlers who are able to do that, who can turn it on and turn it off and know which role to play in the public at any given time, because believe it or not, Jerry Lawler actually did that once when I was in his presence. He had turned it off so well that he was ordering food at a counter next to me, and until I turned and started to walk away, I didn't realize who I'd been standing next to. How he did that was just phenomenal.
Well, that's someone I'd like to sit down and talk to now. You talk about an old pro who's after seeing it all and doing it all.
Yeah, Jerry could give you some phenomenal. I'm sure he could. If you ever do a chapter in any of the books about Mid-South or Memphis wrestling, he could give you all those details, down to the smells and everything.
Oh, I can imagine.
So I guess that's my one of my last questions then. Is there any territory in Blood Red Turns Dollar Green that you haven't written about yet that you want to?
I kind of want to do the whole African trips. Those fascinated me. You hear kind of, these kind of week-long or 2-week-long trips where, a bunch of, mostly American wrestlers get on a bus, then a boat, then a flight, and then another flight, and then a boat, and they eventually end up in Uganda or something. In some of these huge kind of African soccer stadiums with, 100,000 or 200,000. And, I would dearly love to start a novel off there. But what I'm working on next is I'm working on a prequel to the 3 Blood Red Turns Dollar Green novels. I'm going back to the kind of carnival days of the 1920s up to the 1940s and 50s, where wrestling started to really break out, going from a kind of a regional, touring kind of spectacle, somewhere around there in the kind of 20s, they started to figure out, well, why don't we kind of make our own leagues, our own troops, we'll keep our own wrestlers, we'll trade them amongst, and it was really the start of the territory, the NWA, the kind of, the cartel era. So I'm fascinated with that.
So it's kind of the transition from like the Frank A. Gotch and the Farmer Burns and the guys who just went around the country touring as the champions to when they're actually started to be champions in each promotion in each area.
That's it, and I'm kind of interested in the kind of, the golden trinity and and how the money was made and where it went and so again, like for me, it's just this world is so ripe, with conflict, and it's so ripe with, kind of, underhandedness and back alley deals and, smoky bar rooms, and it's perfect for crime.
No shortage of that to exploit wrestling crime novels. There's plenty of back business deals and backstabbing and all sorts of things you can find. But Hollywood tends to be that way too. There's a lot of political backstabbing in that. And I know there's got to be some interest in turning Blood Red Turnstile Green into movies or TV shows. I believe you've talked about it before.
Yes, again, once the second novel came out, I was very humbled in that there was a couple of producers who were kind of vying for the option to develop the novels into a TV series, and I went with one in particular, a kind of a newer, hungrier producer, just a phenomenal talent, tenacious, smart. And, she, in less than a year, has gotten it written by two Hollywood writers into a pilot. They've flown me over to Hollywood. I got to see it in action. I got to be in the writer's room. I got to, make suggestions. It's actually gone so far now that in less than a year, it's already gone out to talent. So a couple of big-name directors and some actors that you would know have, the script, and I this is the part where I started mumble and stutter, because if I say anything here, they will find me and kill me.
Right. We don't want you to jeopardize any deals or reveal anything you're not supposed to.
So I always get a bit stuttery around that part. So yeah, that's where we're at so far. For me, what I really love about it is that the TV end of this project is building momentum, whereas after a year you can kind of gauge, are we running out of steam here? But, there's a whole host of new ideas, plans, things that we have to check out. So I'm really loving it. I'm loving that part of it, because when a young enough guy sits down in Ireland, 35 years of age, decides he's going to write a wrestling novel, has his friends and family begging him not to, and then, 18 months later, you're kind of eating sushi rolls in the Hollywood Hills. It's it's a fast transition. It's a huge transition, but I'm really just thankful. I'm humbled. I'm thankful for everybody who picks up a copy of these books. That I got to go from my home office to Hollywood again. And I'll kind of finish up the Hollywood bit on this. I mean, so much so that Paul Gay, who wrote Liar Liar with Jim Carrey and Heartbreakers with Sigourney Weaver and The Little Rascals, he's the screenwriter of all those. He flew from Hollywood to my hometown in Wexford to launch Volume 3. Again, no payment, none. He was such a fan of the books that he emailed me, made contact. When I was in Hollywood, he made sure that we met up. And then he took that 12 or 15-hour flight from Los Angeles to Ireland to launch my books in my hometown, And I was just blown away by that, because, again, there was absolutely nothing in it for him. He's the guy whose movies have made $500 million, and he's standing in my hometown talking about what a great writer I am and what a privilege it is for him, and stuff like that. Just, it really kind of puts it all into perspective.
Well, I have to say it's a privilege for us to have you on this show as well, because of all you've accomplished and how great the Blood Red Turnstile Green series is. That
my pleasure.
It's a lot of fun, but I don't want to totally wrap it up right yet. I want to give Jordan one more chance, because I heard him start to ask something in the background. So, Jordan, if you got a last question, go ahead.
Oh, no, pretty much I covered everything I wanted to discuss with Paul. And like I said, most definitely I would pick up my copy as well. And pretty much I guess I would leave it to one last question. What is your favorite part about being a wrestling writer, or just pretty much in general, out of all these experiences that you've had in this business so far, what one has to be your favorite so far?
I remember I got an email from Bret Hart a couple of weeks ago, and I did not know that Bret Hart signs his emails off with a kiss. So that to me was a highlight because I was sitting at dinner with my wife and I was saying, well, I have to reply to Bret the Hitman Hart, you know, my childhood idol. Like, do I kiss him back? What's the protocol here? I mean, I know it's an email kiss, but it's an X is a kiss, and I got wrapped up in this this whole kiss thing that. Again, here I am at 35 years of age, not knowing whether to, you know, kiss a professional wrestler at the end of an email. So, you know, to finish the story, I didn't anyway, and I regret it now. I should have. So, Brett, if you're listening, my apologies.
I'm sure he'll forgive you, but let's do one more plug for the series. Blood Red Turns Dollar Green. The novels are available on Amazon and all fine electronic retailers. You can also get paperback copies if you want. And how can they follow you on social media? I know you mentioned it before, but let's give one last plug to all the places they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, if your listeners want to come to paulobrien.info, all the links for the books are there, all the endorsements are there, there's videos there, you know, there's a great video testimony from Mick Foley there. If people want to follow me on Twitter, then it's at tweet Paul O'Brien, so come on over. We're always having a bit of crack and a bit of laugh there, so if people want to follow me there, that's probably the easiest and the best way.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming on the show. And hopefully when we get a little closer to the actual TV coming out and you can reveal the names and not be under any contractual obligation, we can have you back to talk about it some more.
Lovely. Thank you, and I genuinely enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
It's been a lot of fun, and Jordan, I'm sure you agree
Paul.
as well. Yes, so thanks, and have a good rest of your day and a good weekend too.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep, goodbye. All right, that was Paul O'Brien right here on Thursday Night AMP with Jordan and I, and a lot of fun. It's always good when you talk to somebody who's not just in the business but is a fan, and he's clearly still a fan. You know, he's not just writing about wrestling; he loves professional wrestling as much as you and I do.
Well, that's the one thing about professional wrestling that everyone has to understand is that a lot of people that I know are just into it, and some of them don't even take the time to become a fan. So that's what one of the best part about being involved in the business is just being a fan as well, because you get to appreciate it more for sure.
Yeah, I've heard it said time again in so many different interviews, both in print and video and audio podcasts, that the wrestlers who succeed in this business and the people who succeed in wrestling in general are fans deep down. Sometimes WWE doesn't want them to be fans. Sometimes these other organizations, TNA, Ring of Honor, whatsoever, would want them to just be there to do their job. But at the end of the day, if you're a fan and you love it and you're in the business because you were a fan when you were a kid, then you're going to be so much better at transitioning that over to the audience and making them care about you.
Almost definitely.
Yeah, because you knew what you wanted to see when you were a kid and you loved whoever you loved watching on television. You know that you got to connect with the audience in that same way. And Paul's books, I will say, you read Paul's books, get them, Jordan. I'm telling you, get that first one for 99 cents. It's such an easy gateway to entry, as Paul said himself. You're going to fall in love with the books once you start reading that first one, because they're written for people like you and I.
For sure, most definitely. And I can't wait to get my copy. If it's ebook or paperback, I might just get myself a paperback. I don't know, but I know for a fact that most definitely I'm going to read this book, and I am looking forward to seeing more of Paul O'Brien's work.
Absolutely. But before we wrap it up today, Jordan, I want to get your thoughts on a couple of news items that broke this week in the world of wrestling. I think the biggest one we can talk about is TNA moving to Destination America, which unfortunately is not a channel you have in Winnipeg.
And that was one crappy thing, is that TNA did move to is it Destination America?
That's the name.
Destination America, and it's like, I was like, oh, that's good news for the TNA fans in the States. But what about us Canadians? I don't think anyone in Canada has Destination America. So that the problem is that that's a smaller network, and they know that they got a new TV deal, and everyone's excited. But they also have to realize is that they're losing a major audience up here in Canada. Canada is a huge wrestling market, and think about the other countries that don't have Destination America. It's not a popular network, but at least they got the TV deal. which is good, I guess. But hopefully I could find a way to catch a stream online or watch it online. Maybe Destination America is an online thing, because I still want to watch TNA. Like you said, I'm still a fan, so why not watch it?
I don't think you'll have to
hopefully,
worry.
It comes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jordan. I thought you stopped, but I don't think you'll have to worry too long. I think they'll find a television partner in Canada to distribute Impact Wrestling. I don't think, now that Spike's no longer in the picture, they'll partner up with somebody else to do a deal. Probably a Discovery-owned channel that's already broadcasting in Canada, and they'll just subvert through that and get it on the air in Canada.
And I heard the tweet from Havoc that it might be on this. I don't know if this is a joke, but I heard that TNA Wrestling might be on the Discovery Channel, which is, of all places, why would they be? I don't know if you know what the Discovery Channel is, but...
Well, yeah, that's the parent company of Destination America, and they own a whole bunch of different channels, so the Discovery is where Mythbusters airs. I watch a lot of Discovery.
I do, and it's just weird because, like, Discovery Channel, that's like stuff like, I don't even watch that much, so it's going to be kind of cool to see, like, and it's not even related to wrestling kind of Discovery Channel at all, so it's going to be interesting to see that Impact Wrestling on there. It's going to be cool to see.
It's kind of interesting when you look at the history of that channel, too, because it started out as Discovery Network trying to launch an environmentally friendly channel called Planet Green. That's a great idea in theory, but environmentalists aren't that big of a TV audience, and their ratings weren't that good, and they finally just said, wait a minute, this isn't working the way we planned. Let's relaunch it as a channel themed about America and American lifestyle and American people. And they've actually gotten more of a foothold with that than back when they were called Planet Green.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is you have to understand that, and I know I'm outspoken at times throughout my career in wrestling, but if you're an environmentalist and there's going to be an environmentalist channel, you're not going to get a huge demographic because, in all reality, being an environmentalist and a conservator is just recycling and just picking up litter and just doing your job to help protect the world from... Everyone can only do their own part. There's no case in... There's people that have jobs of researching all this stuff, but a channel meant for environmentalists, why don't you just say recycle and throw out garbage where it's supposed to be, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. The one big lure I can remember, because I watched it a little bit back before it changed over, was they had Emeril Lagasse, a very famous chef from the Food Network, had his own show called Emeril Goes Green. Like, it was all about him cooking with organic products and locally sourced food. And if you're a foodie and you're really into that, then it's great. And if you know Emeril, that's really great. But if you're not either one of those things, then why are you going to watch Planet Green to see Emeril Goes Green?
That's the thing, and I'm sorry to say this, and I hope I don't offend any environmentalists out there, but it's boring, honestly, to have a channel based on organic food. Who cares a shit? I'm sorry, I just don't care. And I know fans are probably going to be tweeting me and getting upset, but, like, no one's going to watch, you're not going to have millions of viewers on a channel on how to make an organic pizza. Like, come on. It's not on today's trend.
You're not offending me, but if anybody listening right now is offended, at Jordan J. Garber, and you can send your hate tweet to him and let him know, how dare you disrespect the environmental movement. Well, you know what? I recycle, so I don't disrespect the environmental movement.
I recycle too. So.
Yeah, I just don't think it's a big audience for them. So they were right to rebrand it as a channel about America for America, which is kind of ironic again because Canada is part of North America. So when you say America, you can say Canada as well, but they don't think of it that way.
Exactly. It's North America. Canada's in America. It's North America, so you could say that as well for sure. Yeah. And of course, like Stevie joked around, you can follow me on Twitter at Jordan J. Garber. I'm a really, most of the time at least, I'm a really nice guy, and I'll respond to any of your tweets, messages, and fan support. So I do appreciate the people that support me, that make me want to continue to do this for sure.
And hey, support Paul O'Brien too. He was a fantastic guest on today's show. Follow him at @TweetPaulO'Brien. Follow me at AngryMarks, and you can interact with all three of us at any time. I'm sure we'll get back to you. Maybe Paul might be a little more busy than we are because he's working on these novels. He's doing things in Hollywood, but he'll probably get back to you too, because he likes interacting with the fans. So that's Thursday night AMP.
Follow Brian.
Yep. And unless you got anything else, Jordan, I think we're going to wrap it up here.
Pretty much. Check out, if you guys want to listen, not all, but most of my past interviews I've done in my career, check out WrestlingWorld247.com. JGW this Saturday, we kind of look back in the archives, back to February when I did the interview with the Masterpiece Chris Masters. The following week we'll have Jason the Gift Kincaid on. So JGW on AngryMarks.com. You have to check that out. It's an awesome show. I plugged my Twitter already for sure. And I do the SmackDown Rundown as well. Check that out every Monday. Sometimes it's up on Sunday or Monday. Just go on AngryMarks.com in general, and I will be on there. So continue to support Jordan Garber, and I hope everyone has a good night.
Yep. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thursday Night AMP with my co-host Jordan Garber and our special guest Paul O'Brien. Have a good week, everybody.